All right, I think this is live, and I always got to wait a couple seconds for the public chat to wake up so I can mute it. I don't know why it can't be set to mute automatically, because then otherwise I get an echo. All right, pausing that. Well, I should just mute it, not pause it. All right. Yeah, a friend sent me a link to this video sometime this morning when I was away from home. And I had a little time this morning before I went somewhere and listened to about half of it. And I didn't know where it was from at the time. I didn't check that until I had stopped listening to it. And so I wasn't predisposed against it, but I did notice some things right away, and I just wanted to go over that. And mainly, and if I have some time before 3 o'clock, I'm going to end this at 3, because we all know Globebusters are going to start at 3. And try to get that done, because not that I expect to, draw people away from them. They get like 1,000 viewers on a regular basis. So this is not a competition in any sense of the word, but at least I know what I'm expecting to hear there. I'm not, like I said, I didn't fire this up for them. I fired it up because I saw this movie. So, all right, I'm going to tell you what I saw as I went along. And you can see in the description there, I put the link to it there. It's called Matrix Explained Knowledge from the Abyss. And I point out what the abyss is. In the Bible, it's a negative thing. This is a place where the fallen angels are kept imprisoned until their time is up to be, I guess, judged or finish out their activities. And I said a little bit about Gnosticism. I'll get back to that if I have time before 3 o'clock. And I'm going to, if I do, I'm going to say something about being skeptics, how we often forget that sometimes when we come across something that we like. We forget to be skeptics about it. All right, so as far as the movie goes, the first thing I noticed was it seemed to be that the same, it was a Russian name, and I did not know at the time that this for sure was the same one who did the No Forest video. But so I just kind of put that aside, and one of the first things the text on the screen said was that he didn't speak the languages of this land. That's a really arrogant statement to make in my book. I mean, I run across people like this now and then all the time for many years, people who will say, well, I have advanced beyond, and, you people down, you little people down there way behind me, and that kind of an attitude. And when somebody says, I don't speak the languages of this land, they're giving me that kind of an attitude. And yet this person is writing English. And as it turns out, this was the same person who did the No Forest, and they did speak English, not very well, but they spoke it. So they're kind of not being honest, I don't think, right from the start. Just an observation. And another slick video. It's, someone who knows how to put together a presentation, obviously using our puny human technologies. So once again, the claim to be not speaking our languages is kind of, just clickbait, in my opinion. Putting everybody down except the Russian, or who knows who it really is. At any rate, he goes on to make unsubstantiated claims about layers and components, which is pretty much standard Hindu spiritual teachings that they've had for thousands of years. He even used the Hindu, I don't know exactly the language, if it was Sanskrit or whatever it is, it might be Hindi or Parsi or whatever it is, Farsi. I don't know the language's names, but at any rate, there's standard familiar Hindu terminology for chakras and other things such as that. So, he's using standard Hinduism. So he's not telling me anything new about chakras or anything. He's not telling me anything new about simulation theory, which is what he seemed to be driving at first. That he went on to talk about, let's see, what was it? Prana, that's another just to go back to the Hindu names, he is equating it with the Holy Spirit. I don't see any equation with that at all. He calls prana a system in the video, but the Holy Spirit is not a system at all in the Bible. If he wants to use the term Holy Spirit, that comes from the Bible. He's comparing apples and oranges, because the Holy Spirit is a sentient being. So that's an unsubstantiated claim, and one that if he's saying this is the same as the Holy Spirit of the Bible, that claim can't be made from the Bible at all. There's no resemblance. And as you've heard me say in other hangouts, you identify God by his attributes and by whose God he is, not by names alone. So to call it the Holy Spirit and equate it to prana is, in my opinion, force-fitting and steering the reader, steering the listener. This is often done in writing, where you plant ideas and connect dots for the reader or listener and lead them where you want them to go without technically spoon-feeding them. You are guiding them nonetheless. And I think I've had the sense that that was what was going on in this video. He talks about artificial components. That's where the simulation theory comes in. Why call them artificial? There's no reason given to call them artificial. I'm well familiar with simulation theory. A popular Christian speaker by the name of Chuck Missler is heavy into that. I don't happen to agree, but I don't discount it completely. It could be a simulation, but like I've said elsewhere, a simulation only has meaning outside the simulation. If you're in it, it's irrelevant because everything is simulated, including you. So what point is there in pointing out that it's a simulation? I don't get the significance of the theory unless you can get outside of the simulation. And also, you cannot say that the simulation theory is the only explanation for what's observed, such as the programming of life, of DNA, and the design of microbiology. I mean, he's had some footage I've seen elsewhere of the mechanical engineered nature of biology. I mean, it's not new stuff. And to say the only explanation is that this is a simulation begs the question. It's circular reasoning. He's trying to put his conclusion in his premises for his argument. Premises. When in fact there's another explanation that works just as well, which is that it's designed by an intelligence. God is an engineer. God is a programmer. I mean, that's equally plausible at the least. And we know, as a matter of principle, we should know that if you have a theory that you can make work with what you observe, it doesn't mean it's true. It just means you have a possibility. And if there are other theories that can also work within themselves to explain observation, then those are equally plausible, because in the end, all anybody has is a story, a theory. So when people will say it must mean it's a simulation, I have, as I said, those two major problems with it. One being, who cares if it's a simulation, and the other being, there are other explanations. So it certainly isn't a proof for or against anything. In fact, this is straight up Hinduism, as I put in the description. This is Hindu teaching. And from Hindu, I'm using a kind of a catch-all, but it is the Eastern type of New Agey, the whole package. That whole package is, you know, like I said, I can't rule it out as far as philosophically or logically, but neither can the Bible be ruled out on the same basis. And so I'm just identifying that this is nothing new that this video is putting forth. It's absolutely nothing new. It's all been known for thousands of years. Maybe not the mechanical nature of biology that's been shown by empirical science, but it's certainly not a new idea. And it's just repackaged, just the way back in the 70s, around the later time of the popularity of the Beatles, they were getting into this Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, a couple of names I remember from back then, that there are gurus associated with the Beatles, that was pushing One of them, I forget which it was pushing transcendental meditation was the name they give it, when in fact, and he admitted later, one of the yogi or whoever he was, that this is just Hinduism repackaged for the Western mind. They give it scientific sounding names and claim that's nothing religious, but it's just Hinduism with a thin veneer of Western scientism. And that's exactly what's in this video. It's nothing different. I don't see anything different. And because I've read this before, we can't just write it off as history being lied to, because they're telling us the same thing in this video. If history is lying, then why are they repeating the lie? They just changed a few names, just the way Constantine changed a few names. So I just don't get the point of this video, other than to keep pushing a narrative, which essentially seems to be Hinduism. When I think of both his videos, if this is in fact the same guy that did the No Forest video, it still ultimately can be traced back to Hindu teachings. So I just wish people would be more honest about where they're getting their ideas, because I didn't watch the whole thing yet. I watched about half, and because that's all I had time for this morning. And I wanted to say these things because I took notes as I was watching, and I wanted to get this done quickly. But the point is that I don't think he has, at least for what I've seen, adequately cited his sources on these ideas. They're certainly not original with him. And from what I saw in the video, he makes some claims about geological formations that I would like to see people who are experts in geology and engineering give their perspectives on. And I just watched the other day some good videos on that by, what's the guy's name? Just let me wake up, or wide awake, or let me see if I can go and find that, because I want to get the name right. Wise Up, that's who it is. Wise Up. Sorry about that. It's not Wakey Wakey or anybody like that. It's Wise Up. So Wise Up has a lot of good videos. He seems to know what he's talking about when it comes to pouring concrete. And he makes a very good argument from empirical science that this is how a lot of the believed or told to be ancient monoliths were made, such as pyramids, or, in South America, where they have these very tight-fitting, appearing to be stones, when in fact they were poured concrete. And he shows where the fact that, especially in ancient technology for pouring concrete, that they would have used a lot of lime and sand. And he shows where the lime leaches to the surface and runs down, and it has different colorings. And he looks at the colorings of these alleged rocks and monoliths and says, no, this was not hewn from rock. This is poured concrete. Here's where the rebar is. Here's where the framing is. And he makes a good case for it. So what I saw briefly in this video from the Russian is pretty much the same thing, as far as looking at the stones, alleged stones, sorry about background noise, alleged stones, when in fact it was poured concrete, and it's been around for a very long time. So this does give some credence to the length of time, because a lot of people, and I think is included in this video from the part I saw, is that history is not as long as we're told. That's entirely possible. But I think modern history, at least going back to 1 AD, is pretty reliable, and we would expect that amount of time to have passed for some of this poured concrete to have the aging characteristics that it has. This is something empirical. Granted, nobody, can prove that the concrete they lay today will look that way in 1,000 years or 2,000 years, but it seems pretty well grounded in observable science, which is what empirical science is, to say that this is poured concrete from a couple thousand years ago. So we at least have a couple thousand years of history, at least from that regard. And I don't think there's any good argument against it. It certainly has to be left on the table. I also began to see some clear anti-Jew, without specifying Zionist or anti-powers that be or anything like that. It's always the Jews. He makes that pretty clear. And then toward the end of what I saw, near the middle of the video, he talked about that he is here to break our chains, and that Bible verses he was about to bring up could not be interpreted differently. And that is extremely arrogant and ignorant. I don't like that kind of an attitude. I mean, the guy is pushing himself off as infallible. He's going to tell us the truth, and we can't even argue with him, is the attitude he's given me. So I really don't like this attitude at all. It puts me off, and there should be multiple red flags raising in the conspiracy theorist mind by this point, because at the very least, once again, this guy came out of nowhere. He puts out slick videos. Nobody has talked to him, as far as I know, in any kind of conversational, casual way. Nobody knows much about him. And maybe I'm wrong about it. Maybe I'm just out of the loop. But people seem so willing to blindly swallow what he's saying. Is it because he's Russian? Is it because he does good videos? Is it because Hinduism appeals to a lot of people? I don't know. All I know is that I'm watching, observing many in the conspiracy community, especially the flat earth community, just falling over this guy, just the way they're following over another guy who's pushing Gnosticism. And if I have a minute, I will get into that. And I think I will, because I think I've made the point that I've gone through the video as far as I've watched it. Yeah, as far as when the Great Flood happened, we can again look at how things age and have some idea when it happened. Now, granted, it supposedly happened about 4,000 years ago, and once you get past AD, things start to get a little murkier. We can go back maybe 1,000 pretty reliably as far as archaeology and documents and things, and put those all together. But beyond that, it's murky as far as the number of years. Now, if I take the Bible literally with the genealogies, then there isn't a problem with the age. You know, you can calculate it, taking it at face value. Take that for what it's worth. It certainly can't be dismissed as untrue. And that brings up another point that I hear being made a lot lately, that people will say nothing is knowable, and if you say you know the truth, then you're arrogant and and conceited. And yet these same people who say that nothing can be known to be true will turn right around and say what they know to be false. You can't have it both ways. If somebody says you can't know what's true, then by definition you cannot know what's false. So if they say, I don't know what the truth is, but I know the Bible is bunk, that person is either a hypocrite or extremely simple-minded and not thinking through what the implications of their own arguments are. Just a note to the chat, I do have a link to the video I was talking about in the description. It's the same Russian who did the No Trees, No Forest on Flat Earth video. He's done one called Matrix Explain Knowledge from the Abyss. In my opinion, it doesn't either. It does not prove a matrix. It does not give you, it may be giving you knowledge from the abyss, but you sure don't want that kind of knowledge. I also have some links about Gnosticism, a couple of basic explanation. Gnosticism being mainly the name of that belief system as post-dates Christianity, and that it actually had more of a Jewish source, and then later tried to adapt certain principles from or names and places from Christianity in time. But it does go back to what I have down there at the last part of the description, Theology of the Watchers. I've linked to a video where the guy explains what he means by that, and that is basically that Yahweh, the God of the Bible, is bad, and that we should have, quote, sympathy for the devil, as the Rolling Stones put it, instead, that he was trying to help us and Yahweh is bad. Well, I've gone over the names of God in the Bible in previous Hangouts. I think I did a couple of them. Yeah, the thing about the names of God, just briefly, is that I've shown from the Hebrew text and the Greek Septuagint of the Old Testament that the issue is not how you can trace the names of God used in that day, because when Moses was at the burning bush and says to God, and there had to be a word for God when he says to God, who are you? So he's using a generic term. You are obviously God, the creator, whichever, 50 names you can pick. And he picked a few that were common in the time. So tracing them does no good to identify this God or where the idea of this God came from. And Moses says, who are you? After he's used the name El, Elohim, and Yahweh, which is an acronym for I am that I am. These are all terms that also God used for himself in that passage. But then God says, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He's saying not just an Abrahamic God, I'm also the God of his son Isaac, and then Isaac's son Jacob, his name was changed to Israel. So the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, that's the God is saying he is. Whatever, you can call him Throckmorton, I don't care. The point is his attributes and whose God he is. And as far as whose God he is, I just said Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, that line, those people, that God. And then the God who did those things, the God who's created, the God who Jesus came from and taking on also humanity and doing what he did, that God. So you know God by what he does and whose God he is. So the whole tracing the names things is irrelevant. It's beside the point, just as people will try to say, like the infinite plane guy does. I can't talk to the phone right now. Sorry, phone. And he says that, he goes on and on about tracing the Romans to writing the New Testament and how they were motivated to do it. And I totally disagree on a number of levels, not the least of which is the fact that it is the Babylonian religion that came from, Babylon to Pergamos directly to Rome. It did not stop in Israel on its way there. So they did not have any connection to Israel, to Judaism or Christianity. They went straight from what is today Turkey to Italy. They did not, pass go or collect $200 in Israel. They just went straight there. And so that's the root of Roman Catholicism. And it is nothing to do with Christianity or Judaism. The Romans, when they did, and Josephus is offered as one of the people who allegedly wrote it. He was a Jew who defected to Rome. He lived from about, 37 AD to 100 AD. So he was before and after the fall of Jerusalem, and he chronicled that time. But he was not certainly, by living in that time, was not by default motivated to make up anything. He was a historian. He was chronicling what happened. He was not making it up. If he did make it up, he would be immediately discredited as a historian, and yet people who critique the Bible quote Josephus to critique it. They can't have it both ways again, because if he is so unscrupulous and unethical as to make up the New Testament, then he is discredited as a historian, so they can't quote him, and they can't say he was involved. I mean, they want him as a historian, they have to give up something, one or the other. So what the pushers today of either Gnosticism or Hinduism in whatever form they want to push it, they're ignoring these facts. And they are continuing to hammer this narrative, and they only ever hammer against the Bible. They pick it out. They don't go against Hinduism for obvious reasons. They don't go against Gnosticism for obvious reasons. And they keep trying to smear Christianity with Roman Catholicism, which came, as I said, directly from Pergamos, and before that, Babylon. There's clear historical precedent for that. What any individual Catholic may believe in practice at this time is also irrelevant to this, what I'm saying. What I'm saying is where the roots of that religious practice are, where they're not, and how Josephus certainly did not write the New Testament, neither did the Piso family, and I've gone over those details before. I'm just repeating them because the attacks on the Bible and the claims that these things are actually true keep getting repeated. They're going to be repeated probably today. People go for hours and hours doing monologues and essentially in an echo chamber or rebreathing, circulated air, because you won't hear Christians of any study on their panels who, would absolutely expose these things. I do that in my little corner of the internet. For what that's worth, I at least have to say it. And anybody who wants to read up the other side can go there to hear it, because you won't hear it in the big channels. You will hear the people on the big channels trying to argue both sides. That's always bad. When you hear people arguing both sides, always check out the other side from the other side, not from someone who has digested it for you and put their spin on it. And that includes me. I mean, I give you links to all my stuff, and I show you my source material. So you can check it out and see if I'm taking anything out of context or misunderstanding it. So what I'm doing is, hopefully by example, showing what I hope everybody would do, even with these skeptics. Be skeptical of the skeptics. Challenge the people who say the Bible is bad. Don't just listen to them and their spin on, one-sided arguing from both sides. They're trying to be, that's how sock puppets work in reality, having two finger puppets argue with each other on the same hand. That's what goes on in these big channels. They'll sit there and reaffirm that what they already believe and want everybody to just blindly swallow. All I can ask people to do is not blindly swallow what they say. Don't, do your research. If you want to believe something without researching it, and you just like who says something and run with it, that's fine. But just understand that I'll never buy that. I've never bought that sort of thing, even, growing up in a very one-sided environment of my own. I went outside and looked. And because I figured if I've got the truth, there's no harm or no fear in that. So all I'm asking people to do is what I've done. And here again, it's just mostly about everybody being a true skeptic, a true conspiracy theorist. And even when somebody from alternate media or supposedly someone you trust to be exposing the bad guys, question them too. They make claims. They don't substantiate their claims. They just tell you you're supposed to believe their stories. Just like the Russian video, just like the big channels. They can believe what they want. They're free to say what they want, and they don't have to give the other side. And that's the problem. You're not going to hear the other side. They'll try to pretend that they're giving you the other side, but that's called burning a straw man. That's what the logical meaning of that term is. It means that you set up an argument the other side has not made, because it's easy to burn down since they haven't made it. So you defeat your enemy without ever consulting what your enemy actually believes. And your audience, if they're lazy, won't ever check to see if this is a straw man. They won't ask anyone from that side to explain themselves. And if they do, it's usually an ambush. They will have their side stacked, well stacked, with people who are going to pelt you with every, a question imaginable, as if you're a witness on the stand in a courtroom, and all you ever get is the prosecution, and they never let you finish one answer before they ask another question. They pelt you, they rapid fire, and if you immediately cannot answer every question, or you hesitate, or you may be mistaken and you go back and later and correct your mistake, they don't care. It's all about the moment. It's all about impressing the crowd that's there right now. And that's how people are swayed. And it's basically boils down to the average listener being too lazy to be bothered with doing their own research. They just believe what they hear. And there's nothing I can do about it. People can believe whatever they want. They can be blind. They can be prejudiced. I don't care. What I do care is that the people who are trying to find their way in a new realm of conspiracy will not forget the path that led them there, will not forget to be skeptical of everybody, even the skeptics, and not be snowed by people who say, I'm otherworldly and you can't disagree with me, and I know stuff you don't, even though I'm borrowing it from ancient religions. I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to pass it off as my inspiration and my insights, and you better listen to me because I'm special and you're not. That's the attitude I'm seeing in a lot of these popular videos and popular channels. And so I don't know what to tell you other than do your research, and you're going to hear more of this one-sided argument again today, most likely. I can't guarantee that, but I can tell you that it's going to happen. If not today, another day. You're going to keep hearing the Hindu the Gnostic, the Watcher theology, that is to say, the theology of the fallen angels who want to paint Lucifer as the good guy and Yahweh as the bad guy. You're going to hear that hammered and hammered and hammered because I'm already seeing it. It's going to continue. But if you're a true seeker of truth and one who wants to find it and not just look for it, then keep seeking. Seek out the other side. When you see somebody being critiqued or bashed or painted in a certain way, look for people on that side who will give you their side of the story. That's due diligence. I mean, you can't be, if you got into flat earth by getting out of the box, don't get back into another box. It's just frustrating to see this happen. And I do need to take a call. Vic, do you want to hop on, or should I just end the broadcast? Because I know Globebusters is going to start up and we all want to hear what they have to say, right? So, all right, if everybody's cool with what's been said, if you don't have any questions, I will probably go ahead and shut down. Just wanted to make the quick point today and address that video. Like I said, I've watched about half of it. But what I've seen of the person's attitude is just not motivating me to listen more. So yeah, that is a good question, Kathy, about why so many flat earthers are not looking deeper. It's as if they took one step and stopped. And that disturbs me. There's not enough skepticism in flat earth. There's just not. I mean, we're skeptical of NASA, we're skeptical of the governments, we're skeptical of the Bible, but suddenly skepticism stops there and is never picked up again. Once people are satisfied that the Bible is old and therefore bad and a lie, and yet we can, totally plagiarize Hinduism or Gnosticism, where everybody's cool with that because they think it's new, because they don't know history and they threw away history, and so they got to start all over. And so anybody who knows history can take advantage of that and go, hey, look at what I made up, or look at what I got in my own inspiration or meditation. I was given this, and this is new. And it's not new at all. None of it's new. Absolutely nothing is new. It even says that in the Bible, in the Ecclesiastes, where there's nothing new under the sun. You see that over and over and over. Yet people should read the Bible for a change instead of just reading about the Bible or going to Bible critique sites. Go to the positive side, hang around. That's what got me into flat earth. Like a lot of other people, I went into it to get inside and see what they were saying instead of what other people were saying about them. And if you have any way, any measuring stick, any compass for finding truth from error, use it. Pick one and use it. And don't let other people think for you. So here again, if there are no questions in the chat, I think I'm going to stop the broadcast, because it's just my little quick, while I had this in my head. Yeah, that's true. People who have never read the Bible have an awful lot to say about it. And I know people also who read it once or twice and think themselves expert. Also that they can go look up, somebody told them there's a certain word here and it means such and such, and anybody who disagrees is cherry picking. That's such an arrogant attitude. Yep, I hope everybody's feeling better. I've still got, I'm over the pneumonia. I'm very thankful to God for that. I've got a lot of swelling in the right side of my jaw from another tooth that had to be pulled a couple days ago. Jimmy, get better. Everybody get better. Everybody needs more rest than they're getting, and try to rest consistently. So, but this is not a health channel. I disavow any harm that may come from getting enough rest. So, anyway, I'll see you guys elsewhere. I got to take a call, and then I will talk to you guys later. Sorry to cut this off so soon, but I don't know. Seems to work. See you guys.